to the Lantos Human Rights Commission briefing on the upcoming elections in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. On behalf of my co-chair, Congressman Randy Hultgren, I want to again welcome you all here today. We have an incredibly distinguished group of panelists joining us today. I want to thank them all for their presence. I want to apologize up front, but I just got a call from my Democratic leader that she needs me at a meeting in her office at 2:30, so I'm late. But I wanted to be here to open this panel up. The Commission has been concerned about the human rights situation in the DRC for quite a while now. This is the third time that we've convened a panel of experts since it became clear that President Joseph Kabila would refuse to step down when his second 5-year term ended in 2016. We and many others in Congress have been tracking the efforts by Congolese activists, the Catholic Church, regional leaders, and the international community to facilitate an electoral transfer of power that could open the door to a brighter future for the Congolese people. Both the Obama and the Trump administrations have used high-level diplomatic engagement combined with economic sanctions to try to get to a positive outcome. So I think it is good news that presidential, parliamentary, and provincial elections have all finally been scheduled for December 23rd. Holding elections is a step forward if they are indeed credible. Unfortunately, as we will hear this afternoon, there is evidence of irregularities that raise doubts about the government's capacity and commitment to oversee a fair and transparent electoral contest. For the sake of the Congolese people, I hope that President Kabila does everything in his power to ensure that the elections are free and fair. That includes making sure that candidates for office can campaign safely and that foreseeable technical and logistical issues are fixed before Election Day. President Kabila needs to understand that people around the world are paying attention to these elections. If things don't go as well as they need to, there will be consequences. Today, the House will consider, under suspension, and I'm proud to be a co-sponsor, of H.R. 6207, the Democratic Republic of Congo Democracy and Accountability Act of 2018. This is a bill that codifies existing economic sanctions against individuals in the DRC and encourages additional sanctions until such time as free and fair presidential elections in accordance with the Constitution of the DRC have been held and a democratically elected president has been sworn in and taken office. So President Kabila has a real opportunity a month from now, and I hope that he takes advantage of it. So with that, I want to again thank our panelists. I want to turn this over to Alexis, Arieff of the Congressional Research Service, who will moderate this briefing. And again, I apologize the way this place runs. I have to leave, but I'm really, this is an important and timely gathering, so I'll turn this over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you could be here at the start. Thanks everyone for coming. As the Congressman mentioned, this is a very timely discussion about upcoming scheduled elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country that has seen plenty of internal conflict and humanitarian need over the last 2 decades. But this election process has really raised sort of a new set of questions and concerns, including here in Washington. And members of Congress have been very active in shaping and seeking to shape U.S. policy and influence the DRC, including through the aid appropriations and authorization process, through standalone pieces of legislation like H.R. 6207, which, as was mentioned, is going to get a floor vote today, and other sort of bills, as well as oversight activities. So I'm really thrilled to introduce this excellent expert panel to discuss these challenges in more depth. We didn't pin down the order, but I assume we can sort of go starting with JT and then working back toward me, or does that work? So just to quickly introduce the panel, and there are more lengthy bios available in writing on the side there, so it would be impossible to fully go into depth on everyone here. But we have Mr. John Tomaszewski, which I'm now realizing why everybody calls you JT, from IRI. He's the regional director for Africa at IRI, and IRI has been very active in looking at democracy and governance issues in DRC. We have Tony Gambino, who at one time was headed the USAID office in Kinshasa, and now works as an independent consultant. We have Paul Fagan, who directs the Human Rights and Democracy programs at the McCain Institute. And Vemba Dizolele, an all-around expert on DRC, currently with SICE. And I believe working on a book on on Mobutu for a long time. So let's start with JT and work our way back this way.
Sure. So thank you so much, Alexis, and I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you about something we're tracking very closely at IRI, given our role in this process. So the International Republican Institute, nonpartisan nonprofit organization, participates in DRC and the USAID-funded initiative that seeks to assess the upcoming elections before, during, and after Election Day, should they occur on time as scheduled and stated. Of course, the challenges with that will have a lot to do with access, the ability to mobilize and to get out into the field, and as we've seen from the news that we've received today, getting accredited, where accreditation has now been raised as an issue. Some organizations have run into trouble with that. In March 2018, IRI conducted a joint assessment with its partners from the National Democratic Institute, the International Foundation for Electoral Systems in the Congo, on the Congo's voter registration process to identify potential interventions for the international community to enhance the overall inclusivity, transparency, and credibility of the upcoming elections. This assessment was crucial because at the time that we were having these discussions, if you think back to the spring, a lot of people had many opinions on what was going to happen in Congo, but there were a lot of opinions and not a lot of technical and sort of expert factual detail entering into the debate and the discussion. The key was to have an assessment that looked not only at the voter registration process, but the big picture in terms of the timeline, and not just about the CENI, right, but also the people and the issues of inclusion, political parties, civil society, the ability of transmitting votes and how that will be impacted. These were all issues that were looked at by this technical assessment, which informed additional U.S. assistance to the electoral process. But of course, politics, process, and other things have slowed down the ability to really impact this election. Certainly the elusive nature of the election date originally, and certainly several doubts throughout this calendar has created some serious challenges. On December 23rd, 2018, DRC is scheduled to hold presidential elections. Elections were originally scheduled for November 27, 2016, but were repeatedly controversially delayed by the CENI. President Kabila's second term expired on December 20, 2016, and by the time elections occur, he will have been in office for more than 2 years. While he is not running in this election, and the reason why I'm going through these facts is I was told to set the scene, so provide the scene setting. While the government spokesman earlier said that Kabila would not seek re-election, the president, through his party, the PPRD, handpicked his successor, Emmanuel Shadari, who's a former interior minister, a little-known PPRD hardliner. Research done by a number of folks outlines and highlights the lack of popularity of this individual and certainly issues of name recognition. One would look at that as an opportunity, but what we have in the Congo today, certainly for an opportunity for the opposition, but what we have in the Congo today is an opposition that continues to be fractured. While some efforts have been put in place to keep them together, and there continues to be discussions on that front, what we see now coming about are basically two main factions. So the first issue to think about here is where this will lead these elections. And of course, one of the challenges of this election is what will be the credibility and the outcome. And will the outcome match the will of the people? And the kind of election that we want to hold. So think about some of the challenges and some of the facts here. We've got a number of logistical challenges. The CENI has said that it does not want to have Western support or support for these elections in certain logistical and financial means. And it said that it would provide its own logistics in that regard. And what we've seen certainly are that the logistics that have been done, the trucks that have been purchased and some of these other things, are woefully under the estimations that have been put forward for this election. Currently, the CENI only has about 150 military transport trucks 171 pickup trucks, and 1,800 motorbikes. I don't know what they'll do with the motorbikes, but these motorbikes and these vehicles that I've mentioned to you are the ones that are going to be dedicated to administering an election for a country the size of Western Europe. So I want you to think about that. I think the other issue that comes forward here, and something that we're watching very closely on the ground through IRI's mission, is the issue and the use of electronic voting machines. These voting machines are certainly something I'm sure that will be discussed here. One thing that comes out clearly is how these voting machines will get into the country on time. Some have been delivered, some haven't. Those that have been delivered, their functionality is not 100% clear. It's unclear if they've all been tested, they've all been loaded. How they will get to where they need to get to is also a question that continues to come up in this process. The electronic voting machines, they're currently using about 1,000 of them to 2,000 plan to train electoral officials, which will number in about 100,000 plus. Again, the plans for that and how that actually has happened remains unclear. The electronic voting machines will be a continued source of discussion, I think, as we lead up to Election Day. I think some of you may have seen the Electoral Commission chair come here to Washington and demonstrate those machines for you. As you can see, for those of you who have seen it, and those of you who haven't, you didn't miss much. Those machines certainly raise a lot of questions. A number of studies have been done about their IT security, and what we've seen on the continent recently, whether it's Kenya's elections in Zimbabwe or elsewhere, we continue to buy more technology and see more technology in African elections more than ever. They become more expensive, but what we often find are that these countries are buying Cadillacs when all they need is a Chevy, and that creates a serious problem. You have electronic results transmission technology and other technology, and the cybersecurity for that is not being provided in equal measure, which opens a whole new set of Pandora boxes for complications, cheating, hacking, and other things that will continue to raise additional questions with the outcome and the conduct of the vote. The MONUSCO, the UN mission on the ground, has said that they would help transporting election materials. However, the DRC government continues to refuse this. What we do hear from the ground is that MONUSCO is pre-positioning a number of key assets and logistical materials for the purposes of Ebola assistance. We obviously see that as something else, hopefully for a last minute ask for help so that some logistical arrangements can be provided for. We continue to see issues that relate to women, youth, and persons with disabilities, displaced persons, those affected by conflict. It's very important that we go back to the core of what an election is. An election is supposed to be about the expression or process by which people express their will to choose their leader. The inclusion of individuals like women, IDPs, youth who fail to register in the process or don't have the necessary documents, or those affected by conflict zones who are displaced, they will not have the same level of participation as one would expect or maybe think. That will call into question again, will what we get on December 23rd, if we do get an election, on all three of those elections that are supposed to occur, provincial, National Assembly, presidential, will they reflect the true will of the Congolese people? That is something that I think is going to be of heavy debate, and certainly won't just be discussed here. We continue to call as IRI for more attention to this in Washington, D.C., and we do hope that our mission, while we will not release a public statement during our time in DRC, we will be providing information to our partners and to USG officials so that they're fed with and provided with factual details about what's happening on the ground with regards to logistical arrangements and other technical details on the process. The other thing that IRI will try to do, which we hope to be helpful in this process, relates to the role of domestic observers and helping to empower those domestic observers to coordinate, share information, and collaborate together. What we've seen continually on the continent are questions about the role of international observers. IRI, like other organizations, continue to find ways to innovate, change, update, and stay up with those who are seeking to steal elections by other means. We've seen in Kenya and a number of other countries where election observations have been called into question. What are the Americans doing here? What are the foreigners doing here? You come into the country 3 days before an election, you make a statement and you leave. We're trying to be there in advance. We're trying to work with those Congolese on the ground who have been, continue to be, watching this election from years ago when this conversation began. And we seek to engage and work with those partners on the ground to get them to share information and help amplify their message through the correct channels. There's a lot more to say on this, and I certainly can go into greater detail about other technical arrangements, but I think for the absence of time, or the interest of time, sorry, or for the absence of time, I could talk probably 3 hours. In the interest of time, I'll pass it along to my colleagues.
Thanks, Alexis. I will say I'm not an independent consultant anymore. I'm the executive director of the Panzi Foundation, which will come up in these brief comments I'm going to make.
Important correction for the record.
JT just offered a very sober assessment of the situation now, and I want to start by saying a little bit more why the Congo faces this kind of situation. Then I'll talk a little bit about the political opposition. It seems to me that it's been clear since 2015, that President Kabila is not interested in holding free, fair, credible, transparent elections. Actually, I'd argue it's been clear since 2010, when President Kabila presided over a chaotic process that led to, let's remember, unfair, unfree elections in 2011. These elections were so poorly managed that credible observers like the Carter Center concluded that it was impossible to determine who had won the presidential election. That's 2011. Nonetheless, the international community grudgingly accepted this outcome in 2011. Again, the international community grudgingly accepted a year's delay, as JT mentioned, when elections were not organized for 2016. And again, another year's delay when they were not organized in 2017. Now we've come to yet another deadline, scheduled for December 23rd. One needs to ask a little more why these elections were not organized on time in 2016. There was no mystery about the election date. They'd been scheduled since 2011, 5 years to organize. The Congolese government never has provided a credible explanation. But the real reason for the botched election in 2011 and the 2 years of delay after 2016 is that Kabila's government does not want to hold a credible election. This is not incompetence. This is not a lack of capacity on the Congolese government's part. Actually, I would argue it is extreme competence. Look at what they've accomplished. The president was constitutionally required to leave office 2 years ago. He's still in power. That's not incompetence if you understand his actual role. So elections are now scheduled for 26 days from now. As JT said, and one could say much more, it is sadly clear that preparations are piecemeal at best and imperfect, so that it is impossible now, 26 days away, to change that reality. Frankly, I'm aware of no credible observer anywhere, not in Africa, not in this country, not in Europe, who believes that there's any possibility in the real world that free, fair, credible, transparent elections can be held on December 23rd. There are multiple reports, including one that has just come out from the Congo Research Group, excellent reports by the Enough Project, many, many others, that detail what's been going wrong. So what does that mean? That means today that we face only two options, and both of them are lousy. The first one is that President Kabila's government, and I'm including the so-called Independent Electoral Commission in this because their leadership is fully part of Kabila's team, that they delay elections yet again. Actually, that appears to be their preferred option. Or, if they see no other option, they hold something that they'll call elections on December 23rd, but what will happen is sure to be dramatically more chaotic than what happened in 2011, which means there will be no credible voting in much of the Congo. Therefore, I don't think we should get lost in the details of discussions of voting machines, voter rolls, who's up and who's down among the various opposition leaders, other issues. Rather, I suggest we focus on the crisis that we know is coming. What will the international community, including the United States Congress, do on December 24th when no credible elections have been held on December 23rd? On the political opposition, I want to say this. Martin Fayulu, who's the chosen candidate of 5 opposition leaders, is a serious, brave man. I actually know him pretty well. And he has shown an ability to lead. Mboyamu Matungulu, another of this group of five, served honorably as Congolese finance minister early in this century, and he resigned rather than bowing to corrupt demands from President Kabila and his central bank government. Jean-Pierre Bemba, Moise Katumbi, Adolphe Muzito were excluded from running for president, all of them on thin pretexts. On the other hand, President Kabila's chosen candidate, Emmanuel Shadari, we shouldn't forget, is under European Union sanctions for his many human rights abuses while Interior Minister. As I said at the beginning, I work at the Panzi Foundation, but the better way to describe it is I work for Dr. Denis Mukwege, who's the co-winner of this year's Nobel Peace Prize. So what does Dr. Mukwege think about this? He said in an interview immediately after the announcement that he had received this year's prize, that the Congolese Electoral Commission was preparing, I quote, a parody of an election. Those aren't my words, those are Dr. Mukwege's words. Dr. Mukwege's view is that if credible elections are not held on December 23rd, then the current government, I quote, must hand power over to a caretaker government which can then organize free, fair, credible elections. Close quote. If one wants free, fair, credible, transparent elections, there's no other way forward. Briefly, in terms of the United States government, as is in the current bill, pressure from the U.S. has mattered. Sanctions are good. If we do not have credible elections on the 23rd, then I would argue for the heaviest possible sanctions against President Kabila and the immediate members of his family and those closest to him. That pressure ultimately is the way the United States can help bring about the change that's required in the Congo. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexis. And thank you, Congressman McGovern, and the other members of the Commission for holding this public hearing on the upcoming elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Testifying on this commission, the Lantos Human Rights Commission, is a true honor, and today's discussion on the situation in Congo is a timely one. As Alexis said, I work at the McCain Institute for International Leadership. It's an organization focused on keeping the legacy of John McCain alive, particularly in the area of advocating for human rights around the world. And you might wonder why we're particularly interested in Congo. We've had programming there since 2014. It's a country of particular interest of Mrs. McCain, she had worked there quite a bit over the past few decades. I wanted to read a quote from Senator McCain's last book, The Restless Wave, about the United States foreign policy. He says, "I believe the United States has a special responsibility to champion human rights in all places for all peoples at all times. These words ring truer now more than ever, especially in a place like Congo, where millions have been killed, displaced over the past 2 decades. The United States has a responsibility to stand up for those who continue to be needlessly oppressed and denied the right to live in peace. The U.S. has had a long history of involvement in the DRC, and that relationship continues. Congo is the largest country in sub-Saharan Africa, and its immense human capital and natural